This is Impact Healthcare, people and strategies that are disrupting the health benefits industry. And now, here's your host, healthcare benefits industry expert and the originator of the transparent health benefits movement, Lester Morales.
Welcome back to another episode of Impact Healthcare. And, normally I am the one that is wearing a tight t-shirt that might be showing biceps, but I've got the only guy I think I have to see who has bigger arms than me. It doesn't make me feel good about myself, but Anthony, man, welcome to the show. Thanks for being on.
Thanks, Lester. It's a pleasure to be with you, and I'm really excited to talk about all things PBM industry and really highlight what's really happening within the healthcare system.
So I normally start with intros. So give me an intro on you, on your great company, and I kind of feel that those of us that play in this space where we're fighting against the big boys, we're swimming upstream like salmon. There's usually a why. There's something that happened, a passion that somebody has. I'd love to know what gets you out of bed fired up every day. So intro you, your company, and what fires your belly.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm the GM and Executive Vice President of Drexi. We are a mid-market PBM based out of Phoenix, Arizona. And we're just a different type of PBM, right? When we started Drexi, we wanted to look back to why PBMs existed in the first place, right? And that was to pay claims, to do clinical work, and really from a cost perspective, to get paid for the work that we do, right? That's why PBMs were there. So when you look at Drexi and how we operate, we sit on the same side of the table of the consultants and the plan sponsors to say, hey, this is what we see, this is what we do, and this is how we can help, right? And we will pull on every lever that we possibly can to drive down drug costs because we don't make money on drugs, right? So I came from the pharmacy consulting world. And before that, I was in the stop loss world. And before that, I was actually a professional hockey player. So I have a very interesting background. But on the pharmacy consulting side, I dealt with jumbo cases, right? 50,000 lives or above. And I saw all the games that were happening within, let's call it the big three or the big five, right? That's who I dealt with day in and day out. Never in my thought process did I think I would go to work for a PBM, right? And then I was introduced to Drexi, and I felt that it was a way to change the industry for the good. And so with all the things that are happening today around fiduciary responsibility, transparency, drug costs, I feel like I made the right choice, and I'm on the right side of history.
Awesome. So in case we're going to just start for 2 seconds and go PBM 101. So PBM, Pharmacy Benefit Manager. It is the administrative portion of the health plan that deals only with prescription drugs. I often find, and quite honestly, working for the third largest consulting firm in the world for nearly 15 years, if somebody would have asked me how much and how does a PBM, a pharmacy benefit manager, and so you'll probably hear Anthony reference the big three, Optum, CVS, and Express Scripts, and we're not picking on them. I think the model is just what the model is, and it's just the reality. And if we do the big five, we got to add Prime and Ingenio, who are players with Blue Cross and Blue Shield, so all of the major players. But if somebody would ask me that question, I'm scared to kind of admit it now. I don't know that I would have known the answer of the how and how much, because at the end of the day, we would just ask for their AWP and the discount, and then we would go back to the client and we would have that spreadsheeted, and then we would have a spreadsheet on what is your guaranteed rebate amount, and he or she who brought back the biggest rebate won. Walk me through how much, and why that logic is completely wrong.
It all can be manipulated, right? So it's everything around pharmacy and PBM is based on contract, right? So contractually, if I can rebucket a drug from, say, a specialty drug to a brand drug, right? And we're just going to talk about rebates for a second. I have to pay you less in rebate, right? And this is happening throughout the whole ecosystem, right? So again, whenever you ask for a guarantee, and I have some great stories about that too, especially on the pharmacy consulting side, is you can change a word in a contract, you can put commas and periods in certain things, you can contradict one thing you say on page 5 to what you say in page 12. That always goes to my advantage, right? Not my meaning Drexi, but one of the big three, right? So if, again, if I define what a brand drug's in a certain way, that allows me to take a bunch of drugs and say, I'm going to put them in the generic bucket. Now we're going to get into this later around, I know Johnson & Johnson and kind of what happened, with specialty generics. And essentially that's what's happened, right? But then from the other side, right, if you don't know what the actual cost is, right? So, you have this vertical integration of the big three, right? They own the distribution. They own the GPOs. They own the pharmacy. They have the PBM. They own all the contracts. So they're buying and selling within their own entity. It allows them to manipulate how much they're actually making, right? And therefore, if the basis of the guarantee or the discount off of at AWP or WAC or whatever you call it is their own, I can manipulate that, right? And then on top of it, throughout the year, I'm never going to underperform or overperform based on what I give you, right? So if I'm going to tell you I'm going to give you an 85% off of generics, well, it incentivizes me to hit that number exactly, right? Because if I underperform on that number, I got to give you money. If I overperform, well, I'm losing money. So again, right, it's all a game of, hey, we're going to do this over here, we're going to do that over here, and you're never on the winning side at the end of the day. Versus kind of what we do on our side is, if we give you if we overperform and get a 91% discount off of AWP, right, you're going to get the full scope of that, right? You're going to get all of that back. So that, at a high level, it's always about contract, and it's always about what's in the contract. So funny story about this is, when I was on the pharmacy consulting side, one of the big three, I was with one of their executives, and we tracked all this, right? We had a system that allowed us to re-adjudicate claims as they came in to make sure that the PBM was staying true to their guarantees. But in that conversation, it was like, hey, how do your guys actually sell discount? And he flipped out a bunch of business cards, and he goes, pick one. I'm like, well, what am I picking? He goes, this is an 87, this is an 88, this is an 89, and this is a 90% discount off of AWP. I'm like, well, I want the 90. He goes, it doesn't matter to us. It's all the same. So they would go and say, what do you want? And I will back end write the contract to ensure that we get to that number. So that's,
I like in the conversation, it's kind of no different than the discount on the medical side, right? It's like, oh, XYZ carrier gets a bigger discount. What in every sense of the math, right? The arithmetic that we're missing is the starting point. So it doesn't, to your point, a 90, an 87, a 50, a 40, a 30, a 20, off of what? Off of what is the key thing? And I often joke, my degree is in risk management insurance. I can't ever say that I'm the smartest person, but it literally took me 15 years to finish the word discount off of billed charges on the medical side. Well, if you don't understand what the billed charges is, and the billed charges is controlled by somebody that you can't control. So in your case, I'll give you a discount. I just won't necessarily tell you what I bought it for in the first place. And so I can give you a discount off of anything because I can make it up. Last question on that. So then if they make money on the spread, right? I bought it for $1, I sell it for 20, whatever. And then the rebate game and blah, blah. How does somebody like Drexi get paid?
So we're on a per employee, a fixed cost, right? So whether it's per employee per month or per member per month. So that way, right, the only way we make money is just administration, right? And that's what PBMs do. They administer, right? We pay claims, we adjudicate, we work on the formulas. That's how we make money, right? So to your point, the average generic spread ranges from $25 to $40, right? And if you're running a good plan, your generic dispensing rate should be around north of 90%, right? So if you put that in perspective, you're a 1,000 life group, you produce around 10,000 claims a year, right? The big three are running around 85% of generic dispensing rate. So that means 8,500 claims of your 10,000 are generic claims, right?
And they're making between 25 and 40 bucks a
It's not grand larceny, but they are stealing from you 8,500 times, right? At the end of the day. So when people come to us and say, well, how come your average generic is 8 to 12 bucks and, one of the big three is 25 to 40? It's like, well, one, I don't make money on drugs. Oh, and by the way, Caremark is also the largest buyer of generic drugs in the world. So to say that they can't buy drugs cheaper than I can, they absolutely can. But again, right, this is how they make money. They make money by selling you more drugs at a higher cost, plain and simple, right? At the end of the day.
It's such an interesting thing. If there's anything that I've learned about this business 22 years later, it's never the question that was asked. It's always about the 10 questions that I never asked because I didn't know how to ask the question. So like, again, when I was doing this at Willis and we were doing these analysis, we were doing what everybody else did. It's like, okay, well, I'm only comparing based on the discount because it's the only thing I knew how to ask. But that was never the right question to begin with. So I think, we're going to go through this and say, hey, folks who are listening, lesson number one is if you are getting an analysis from an advisor that is strictly comparing things off of discounts and rebates, it's the wrong analysis to begin with, and that shouldn't be even how you're having that conversation.
Absolutely. And even thinking about like rebate numbers, right? And you've probably seen these before. Like, I'm going to give you a $4,000 rebate off of specialty drugs, right? And I'm going to give you this number off your brand 90, this off of your brand 30. The question that needs to be asked is, what's included in there, right? So if I'm working from a big pool of rebates and I start eliminating drugs that I'm going to give you a rebate on, well, guess what's going to happen? That's going to artificially inflate the rebate value that I'm going to give you, right? So that's not a way to comparison, right? So if I eliminate LDD drugs and biosimilars and, this and that, and, now you're seeing people eliminate insulin products. And so all of a sudden your bucket is smaller. Guess what? Your rebate numbers go up, but your net of rebates don't change, right?
Right.
If you're only selling on that number, that's a problem, right? And that's what the PBMs want you to think. It's like, hey, I'm going to give you a lot of money, but in reality, when push comes to shove, they're keeping a lot of that, because if they can eliminate those, guess who gets to keep them? They do.
So now that we understand the game, and it is a game, gosh darn, it's a game. I want to go to probably one of the biggest stories guys like you and I geek out on, which is Johnson & Johnson. So I'll give my layman terms of what happened, and let's dive into, and we're not throwing Johnson & Johnson under the bus. We're not we're literally going to have a factual conversation about what happened and the fact of what Johnson & Johnson or an employer could do to mitigate ever being in that same situation. That would be my goal, and that's the lesson plan for today. So Johnson & Johnson, an employer, so not the pharmaceutical manufacturing company. We're going to say Johnson & Johnson, the employer of thousands and thousands of employees, was sued by a particular employee for breach of their fiduciary responsibility as they run the plan. So they are the fiduciary. You said the word plan sponsor. They are the plan sponsor on their self-funded medical plan. And this particular employee, who, as we know now, is a little smarter than the average bear, was taking certain medications that, if she would have walked into the same CVS with her GoodRx card or cash or whatever, could have bought a drug for $10 that was going through the plan at $7,000. And the reason this is important is we talked about the big three and the big five. So when a compensation model of a PBM, a pharmacy benefit manager, which is all of the ones that are attached to the major insurance companies, which is now, if we're talking big five, 92, 93% of all employers are on. So if you're 92, 93, if your insurance company is one of the big ones and your PBM is one of the big ones, this is talking to you, so pay attention. That means that if their compensation model is making money off of selling a drug for a higher cost, then the reality of what happened to Johnson & Johnson could happen to every other employer that's out there. So what I want to start with is, A, did I get that summary right? And B, how does an employer protect themselves from this happening to them?
Yeah. So yes, you hit the high level 10,000 foot view of what's going on, and to take it and get a little more granular about it, it comes back to the conversation of how PBMs make money, right? And it's around it's about definitions and contract, right? So what do I mean by that? So this all had to do with around specialty generic drugs, right? Now, whether you call it specialty generic or not, it's still a generic drug, right? So specialty has been out there for a while. So you have all these drugs that have been on the market to treat, cancer and autoimmune. And so some of these manufacturers are losing patent, right? So now these generic drugs are hitting the market, right? So so Johnson & Johnson had Express Scripts, what is their PBM. And the way that Express Scripts identified specialty generics is that they put it in the specialty category. So everybody on here knows, hey, I get a specialty discount of 20%, right? But even the specialty generic drugs still have a very high AWP or WAC cost, right? But generic drugs typically get MAC'd, maximal allowable charge, right? So if I MAC that drug, it gets like a 95 to or anywhere from like an 85 to a 99% discount off of that starting point. But if I can identify that drug as just a specialty drug, guess what? I don't have, as ESI, I throw that out the door, and I'm only going to give you a 20% discount. So a drug that, again, and I'll pull it up just so everybody can see real quick. I have the examples here. Here we go. Let me share this. So Lester, you can see this, right?
Yes, sir.
So we'll take this one, imitab mesylate, which is generic Gleevec, which is used for leukemia. So Johnson & Johnson and their employees were paying $16,398 for a drug that you can get for $89, right? So the issue really here was, how are they identifying these drugs, and are you getting the true discount? Now, with that being said, as a pharmacy benefit manager, we contract with lots of pharmacies, right? And some pharmacies will allow you to map these drugs and some will not, right? So by giving members choice and options, right, of where they can buy certain things, right, kind of helps that fiduciary responsibility, right? I'm not forcing a member to buy this drug through ESI specialty, right? So again, contractually, right, these drugs that are specialty drugs, you are essentially almost forced to buy it from them because, again, they want to control their profit. So if you notice, right, 16,000 versus 89, well, if the starting point is 18 grand, well, 95, 99% discount gets you to $89. So there are certain pharmacies, right, know that they acquire these drugs at a very low cost. Hence the reason why they're a pass-through or a cost plus or whatever it is. They make their small percentage, and now your employees reap the benefit of this deep discount.
So let me ask the question here. In that example, so we're going to stay with the same exact drug. If it was with an organization like Drexi, the employer would have been charged $89.10 plus some sort of admin fee for that belly button, every month, and the employee would have paid their normal, copay or whatever it is. But effectively, on that one prescription, there would have been I can't do math that big, but a $16,300 savings every time that prescription was filled.
Every 90 days. So it's a 90-day fill. So so multiply that by 4 if that person was on the drug for the year.
And as I look up and down this thing, some people, the skeptical people, right, would be like, oh, Anthony, you're just cherry picking. But I was quickly glancing at the left versus the right column. The only way I could say it is this is the game. The game is buy low, sell high, make that spread. Don't tell anybody what you're doing. Not many people are going to ask. But when I look at those numbers, there is a not just a little bit. Like, I'm trying to find one that's less than 3 times the cost.
Maybe like this one right here is a little close. Other than that, I mean, yeah, it's absolutely crazy.
So to go back to the Johnson & Johnson. So these are the exact drugs that were named in the lawsuit.
Correct.
The left is theoretically what Express Scripts was charging for the drug. That's what's running through the plan. The right in green is what you guys would have charged. But is it safe to say that anybody who is with one of the bigger pharmacy benefit managers, you could take these numbers and they'd roughly be the same? It might be $1 here, $1 here, $10 here, $10 here, but the way and the spread and how it all works is effectively the same thing.
Yeah, at some way, shape, or form, right? And they're going to play with certain drugs over other drugs, but at the end of the day, right, these drugs are going to probably be on your list in one way, shape, or form. Some as egregious, some not as egregious, because now the light has been shed on this. So again, right, the big three are going to start making adjustments here, right? Because they do not want this information out there. No different than when you look at the pressure that they're getting around spread pricing, right? So they're now changing the way that they're contracting with retail pharmacies. But remember the conversation we had around a $20 to $40 spread on generic drugs? So now they're going back and saying, you know what? We're going to give you acquisition costs plus what they call a management fee of $20 or $25. So they're doing the same thing. So they're now just transparently screwing you versus, doing the right thing, right? So drugs that we get for $2 or $3, right, based on our contracts and our values, they're going, no, we're going to charge you $25, but we're going to tell you we're charging you $25. Well, that doesn't help me out, right? You're still taking money out of my pocket where I know I can go get the drug for under $5. But now they're just saying, hey, to population, to the FC, and to everybody going on, hey, now we're being transparent on what we're doing, right? I don't know if that really helps anybody, but that's the basis to their madness.
So let's keep going with this Johnson & Johnson thing. So I was shocked at a couple of things, and I don't think I realized you could stop sharing unless you got another example of that.
Nope.
So when I think about what happened now, breach of your fiduciary responsibility. So an employer might be thinking, Johnson & Johnson, the employer, I have an advisor. Presumably, Johnson & Johnson's working with one of the largest advisors in the world. Several billion dollar now, their names on many buildings in most big cities across the US. They're working with one of the largest pharmacy benefit managers. They have one of the largest health insurance companies. So all of the components of what they would think is their due diligence. I hire all these smart people. They're the biggest of there. It's like going to Home Depot and thinking that you're getting a good deal, or you've looked everywhere you can because you went to Home Depot, right? Where does that logic fall, I guess, in there? Or, what are your thoughts of that? Because the average layman person who's going to listen to that was like, yeah, I'm doing the same thing. Like, I work with a reputable broker, I work with a reputable insurance company, and I work with a reputable pharmacy benefit manager. Where's the flaw in this logic?
What the PBMs are paying on the back end to place that business in a large coalition from a financial aspect, right? It's all about the money. Follow the dollars, right? So if one of those entities makes money based on drug spend, right, or some other, lever that they're pulling on, right? Well, then guess what? It might be beneficial for them to look the other way of saying this is happening, right? And so when you think about large coalitions or, people going into these big aggregations of, that's with one of these big consulting houses, the question you really got to ask is, are they looking out for my best interest? Or is there something else happening on the back end where they might not be, right? I mean, Johnson & Johnson is in one of these large coalitions, right? So if it's happening with them, that means it's happening throughout the entire coalition. And if one of those entities are profiting from that, that's another problem, right? And the other issue that Johnson & Johnson has, you got to remember, Johnson & Johnson sells drugs. And so they sell drugs and they're on the preferred formularies of like ESI and Caremark and Optum. So it's like, go ahead and screw my employees, but keep selling my drugs, right? That's another problem in it's by itself, whether or not it's their employer plan or not. So again, right, there's a lot of moving parts within this lawsuit that it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out.
So you said a magic word that I'm going to tell on myself. I think I was super like, hey, I'm here to save the world when I got into this business. And like everyone's here to like kumbaya and whatever. And so I was thinking, and this is no joke, I was thinking that a formulary, so I want you to define what a formulary is. But I was thinking a formulary was a list of drugs that people who have cool letters behind their name that went to pharmacy school got together and said, these are the drugs that actually save people's lives. That these are like the best of the best at having two parents who have passed away from cancer. Like I think of my entire career until I really started digging in the back room of this, I truly thought that a formulary was there to get the best outcomes because this industry wants to impact lives. What I now know that's not true. Talk to me about what a formulary is, how it's derived, and what is your approach to that, and what do you recommend employers asking and advisors asking?
Yeah, so formularies, again, if we're talking about the big guys, formularies are built around maximizing profitability, right? That at the end of the day, those are the drugs that pharma comes to and says, hey, we're going to pay you money, put these drugs on there, right? I mean, yes, do they save lives? 100%. Are they the most cost-effective drug to get the same clinical outcome? Not always, right? Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. So to put this in very simple terms, right? We had this huge debate over the last 20 years around insulin, okay? The two major manufacturers of insulin are Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk, right? So we'll pick on Lilly for a second, who makes Humalog. If you look at most formularies, Humalog is the preferred insulin on all of those formularies, right? But most people don't realize Eli Lilly on the exact same production line, it literally makes the exact same drug called insulin Lispro. And they make an insulin Lispro quickie pen just like they make a Humalog quickie pen. The cost differential between those two up until, this drop in insulin prices, but it's a good example because it's easy to explain, is you could treat the exact same diabetic that you treat today for $1,000 on insulin Lispro for $100. And you can go to Lilly's website and they tell you right there that says, hey, we make lower cost insulin, non-branded insulin, not a generic, non-branded. So the exact same, it's called bioidentical for a lower cost. However, you need to check with your commercial insurance because the branded insulin might be cheaper for you, like based on preferred and non-preferred product, right? So they'll prefer Humalog and give you a $25 copay, non-prefer the insulin Lispro and give you a $45 copay. So when you show up to the pharmacist is going to go, hey, we're going to give you Humalog. It's less for you, but guess what? The plan sponsor pays the rest. So again,
I want to put a pause there because when I heard this, I was like, there's absolutely no way that this is. I want to make sure everybody understands this. Where I'm going to use my Starbucks. It would be the equivalent of Starbucks manufacturing this coffee and then changing this little logo from green and turning the little gal upside down, and one conveyor belt goes this way and one conveyor belt, but it's like literally same.
Exact.
And one of them is 10x more expensive. On their website, it tells you it's cheaper, but my formulary dictates where I, the consumer, could buy it, and I, the consumer, can buy it cheaper over here. So, yay, me, I win. But it's all on the backs of the employer in this example, or the insurance company if it's there. I would ask two questions. Number one, if this is a fully insured plan, because these PBMs manage the fully insured, why in God's green earth would they want that same game to happen under a fully insured scenario? Self-insured, I kind of get it. Like, hey, it's not their bill. Let the client pay for it, whatever. But why does the same thing happen on the fully insured side too?
Because they get to keep all the rebate, one. Two, they're getting paid by pharma to put it on there. And three, if you're a high utilizing plan, they're going to raise your rates anyways, and they're going to make their money, right? So at the end of the day, you're still paying for it. You're just paying in a fully insured setting versus a self-funded setting.
So in the Drexi model, in that same example, can I, the plan sponsor, decide that, hey, I don't know, why don't we have like the generic one? Why don't we have Liz Pro as our preferred? Can I decide that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do it anyways, right? So even on our, like, if you have a high deductible health plan, for example, and they have what they called expanded preventative drug lists, right? And on those expanded lists, like whether you went to like Humana back when they were in the commercial space or whatever, they have a lot of those drugs at zero cost, right? They have Ozempic on those expanded lists for free, right? So what we said is we want to manage the diabetics, right? And it's cheap to manage the diabetics. So why don't we offer it for free to the members, right? So remember, like, and then through step therapy and prior authorizations, we essentially direct patients to the lowest cost, right? So our sole purpose is to get to lowest net cost while protecting the plan and the member financially with the same clinical outcome, right? So if I can get the same clinical outcome on a $9 pen versus a $100 pen, why wouldn't we do that? Now, I wouldn't do that if I want to make more money on drugs, but because I don't make money on drugs, this is how we clinically appropriate, this is how we protect plans around their fiduciary responsibility, essentially.
And when you say don't, I want to ask the question. It's not only don't, but it's can't. It doesn't, like, your contract says, like, hey, my only source of revenue is this number that you're sending to me.
That's right. And even our contract with the pharmacies we're not spreading this, right? We want deeper because we're going to pass it from here to here. And what's even better than that, you talk about data and the access to data and how hard it is to get all of that information from the PBMs, right? The data that all of our adjudication, all of it sits on our portal. You can download it at any moment in time to see what did the member pay, what did I pay, what did the drug, I mean, all of it is there, and you can audit 24 hours a day if you want to as those things come in.
So it's funny. This is the second episode that I recorded today, and one was with an advisor. You and I both know, and we have the hardest time getting the data out of a regular PBM. And I often will quote like there's a problem here if you can't get the data on there. But when we think about what you just said, it's auditable, it's accessible. I'm going to give it to you in all its right form so that you can do an analysis. When we think about the Johnson & Johnson lawsuit and the fiduciary responsibility, that actually is germane, like right down the center of the definition of an employer being a fiduciary.
Correct. If they don't have the data, right, how can they be expected to do right by the plan and its members, right?
It's what exactly just happened when you pulled up the Johnson & Johnson, scenario. Like, I am 100% sure that Johnson & Johnson wasn't like, you know what, we're going to screw all of our employees. And in the meantime, we are also going to pay more as an employer on our second largest expense. I am 100% sure that that didn't happen.
Absolutely.
What did happen is they had no clue, because no matter how big they are, they're not getting the data either.
And again, they're not the experts, right? They trusted their advisors to do right by them and make sure all of these holes were plugged. Now, granted, right, PBMs are known, right? I remember the movie, Vegas Vacation. He's in the dam, and he's put the bubble gum and like 4 more holes pop out, right? Essentially, it's the same thing. Like, you feel like you've got everything figured out, and the next thing you know, the PBM figured out a new way, a new methodology to open up the dam again, right? And so that's the battle that you're in when you are going into business, somebody that makes money by selling you more drugs, right? By manipulating the claims, by manipulating the financials for their own interests, right? At the end of the day.
I mean, it's a misalignment of incentives. It is a I win, you lose scenario. And, I often now look back at the analysis that I used to run for very large companies, at Willis. And I'm thinking, my God, I saved them money, but I essentially just brought them back a lesser crappy contract and program than they had before. Still saved them money, saved the people money. But I'm playing from the very, very worst, and it's a little bit better. But fundamentally, it wasn't structured anything different. And so thus far, and I want to get into a whole category, thus far I have heard the alignment of interest needs to be there. That is arranged through following the money and making sure that the compensation that your pharmacy benefit manager is making is solely off of some sort of administrative fee. Call it a PEPM, a PMPM, a per script, some sort of, even a per script. Sometimes you could say, hey, they're incentivized to sell you more drugs when maybe you didn't necessarily have to. Like, you can kind of get that, but at least, you can kind of get closer to that. So some sort of admin fee, control of the formulary. So, hey, making sure that the employer has control of the formulary, access and control to have their data, get their data, and do whatever the heck they need to do with their data. And ensuring that probably the people you play with around there, right? The advisor, the administrator, all of that stuff needs to also kind of be aligned that says, like, because in this consortium, Johnson & Johnson conversation, I mean, I don't know, I am not making their money, but I am 100% positive, because I know how this works, that the advisor was making money on the more volume that they pushed inside of that consortium. So, like, the carrier is misaligned, the advisor is misaligned, and the PBM is misaligned. Well, duh, 3 publicly traded misaligned organizations are 100% going to yield exactly what just happened.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, yeah, I mean, again, right? I mean, there's, at the end of the day, right, when you do the analysis, when you look at the drug spend, like, I don't care what pricing methodology you use. I don't care. All I want to know is, what is my net spend going to be, right? What's the bottom line number? And what other, and are there other levers and things that we can pull on to make that go even lower? Now, granted, you are going to get to an inflection point where you can't go any lower. It just is what it is. But then understanding that you're with a partner that if something else happens, because the drugs are getting more expensive. Trust me, it's going to continue to rise 10 to 15% every year for the foreseeable future with everything that's happening in the market, right? Generic drugs really aren't the issue as much anymore. Now, they are on that specialty generic example, but where pharma is going is specialty brand drugs, gene and therapy drugs. I mean, it is getting to a point where you need to make sure it's not so much what's there today, which that's important. You can help there, but what's to come in the next year, 18 months, 2 years down the road? And are you aligned with a consultant? Are you aligned with a PBM that's on your side, that's going to help you minimize that risk going forward? Because now the drugs are impacting at a bigger level than any time before. Stop loss and the medical side, and we didn't even talk about the J-code stuff that's happening on the hospital side. that could be a whole nother podcast, right? On the misalignment on pricing within the hospital system there. And you think about all that. So
well, and I was going to dive into the specialty side, right? And let's kind of finish it out on the specialty, and then we'll talk about a case study or two on the specialty side. So again, I think about this. I went back and I did an analysis, and I'm like, man, he who brings back the highest rebates wins, and that's a lot of times being driven by the specialty drugs. All of the nice color, beautiful pamphlets that are produced by the normal PBMs and the normal insurance companies say they're managing, something, they're doing something, right? They're claiming that they're doing something. At the end of the day, when it comes to specialty drugs, if we had to leave with the audience with, hey, what's the must-dos around the specialty drugs, and what are the programs that you need to have in your program? Because to your point, if they're going to continue to increase, there's got to be the levers that you have to try to combat the thing here. What are those things?
Yeah, so I will say this, and everybody really needs to understand, in the specialty drug arena, if you're buying drugs U.S. side straight up from a specialty pharmacy, there are no deals on specialty, right? I don't care who you go to. So this discount, I'm giving you a 22 or a 20, it's all BS, right? There's not enough people that are on these drugs like there are on generics to drive down costs, right? Until they turn to generic. So at the end of the day, everybody's playing from the same pool, right? So the what it comes down to is risk tolerance, right? What levers do you want to pull on, right? And there's a lot of them out there. Rebates is never going to win this game, right? If you think about rebates, every dollar you spend, you lose 20 cents if you want to play the rebate game, right? So that's a losing proposition. There's 340B programs out there. There's international drug sourcing programs out there. There's patient assistance, copay cards, and manufacturer savings programs out there. But you even got to be careful with all of these point solutions out there because there's big dollars involved, right? There's risk there of being taken advantage even in that scenario, right? So really evaluating, who you're partnering there with, what is their percentage or what are they taking out of the pot? What are you losing from a rebate perspective? And what's even crazier now, because again, a lot of entities are taking advantage of this. Pharma has started to pull away from some of those fundings, right? Some of the patient assistance, manufacturer savings. So when that starts to happen, now entities, all these bolt-ons and things like that are going, well, we need to make up the revenue. So what we start to see is like spread pricing on international drugs, right? So now they're kind of acting like the big three in the US because they're like, hey, we want to make up some dollars here. So again, aligning yourself with a partner that's going to give you all the information, like, hey, no different than we do on the retail side. This is what we buy them for. This is what we sold them for. Here's, again, just getting to that level of granularity, because you can get into a position where, you have to run these programs and members got to, buy into this. And you want to make sure the bang is worth the buck, right? Are you doing all this to save 10%? Or are you doing all this to save 30 or 40%? So that will determine on kind of who you partner with, that level of granularity.
For just the education, give us the cliff notes on what a manufacturer's assistance program and what an international sourcing is, just in case someone has never heard those.
Yeah, absolutely. So manufacturer's assistance is pharma gives back 56 cents on the dollar, when they sell drugs, right? Whether that's through rebates or through some of these programs. So if an individual, and I'll give you an example, most of them are based on the federal poverty level, a percentage of federal poverty level, somewhere between 400 and 600%. So if you have an individual that's has a family of four and makes $170,000 or less a year, pharma will give you the drug for free if, in fact, that you set up the program correctly, right? So this has been around for a while. So now what's happened over the last 2 years or 18 months is pharma knows this is going on. So some of the big manufacturers are putting a stop to that, right? They're like, we don't want to give you free drugs, right? We don't care what you do if you carve these drugs out and try to come say there's no coverage, right? Because there can't be any coverage under the commercial insurance to get approved for these drugs, right? So the fallback to that is international drug sourcing. So just so everybody knows, none of the drugs are manufactured in the U.S., right? They're manufactured, like Johnson & Johnson makes their drugs in the Netherlands, like their Stelara. AbbVie makes their drugs in Puerto Rico. And then there's drugs made in Germany and the UK. And then they ship them all over the world, right? So when they say drugs are FDA approved or are approved by, the Canadian government, the manufacturer in that country, it has oversight, right? So if they're going to ship drugs into the U.S. or they're going to ship drugs there or wherever, they have to meet certain protocol, right? So it's not like they ship a bunch of drugs to the FDA and then all of a sudden now it goes through protocol. So the same Stelara that we buy in the U.S. for $25,000 a month, we can buy from the Canadian specialty pharmacy for $7,000 a month. The price difference is the way that the system is set up in the U.S., right? Rebates, copay cards, all of this people and the GPOs and all the money and PBMs, they all want a piece of it. So pharma has to raise the cost to be able to pay all of these people their money. And so that's the differential, right? It's the exact same drug in the exact same box being shipped to your house. Instead of Erie, Pennsylvania, it's coming from Toronto, Canada, overnighted, and it arrives at your doorstep just like it does today. But there's not a rebate in the world that will make up the difference between $7,000 and $25,000 that Stelara is charging and Johnson & Johnson.
I have a consultant, unfortunately, a regular one that today sent me something. It's like, hey, I need this filled out. And I was basically like, look, $100,000 drug that gets a $12,000 rebate, or let's go 15 because it's easy math, is $85,000 of net cost. How about we just buy the drug for $30,000? The equation is that. Okay, so we talked about Johnson & Johnson. We talked about formularies, spread, rebates, specialty. What does this amount to at the end of the day? Let's pick one of your favorite. And, you and I have worked together for a couple of years, so this is not hey, we're cherry picking one. I mean, you could throw any client out there, and they're all going to have roughly similar results. But something that has like a good story that, what I love about this and what gets me out of bed every day is what we're doing. And so when you said $170,000, like it literally drives me nuts that my dad was on Revlimid. Revlimid has a patient assistance program. My parents made $93,000 combined. My family filed bankruptcy because every year my parents hit their out-of-pocket max and didn't have an extra $18,000 sitting for a family deductible. And you look at that, like the impact. So like, talk to me about an impactful story that's like, hey, the client's saving money, but at the end of the day, we're saving people, human beings. We're saving them money too.
Yeah, absolutely. So a case we took on January 1st, and you'll get a kick out of this because this entity is a packaging company for pharmaceuticals, right? So they ship the drugs in and this company repackages them and then ships them to all the pharmacies, right? They're in St. Louis, Missouri, and they came on, they bought into the international drug sourcing. They bought into patient assistance. But so they were spending in 2023, they spent $1.7 million in drug spend for their employees. They have a hemophiliac on their plan. It was with United Optum combined. The last month, December, they charged $71,000 for that hemo patient for their drugs. When we took it over, and we didn't do patient assistance, we didn't do international drug, none of that stuff. We simply moved it from Optum Specialty to our specialty hemo pharmacy, the partner of ours that we contract with. The claim went from $71,000 to $40,000 for that hemo just by simply changing who distributed the drug. So you think about that, and that's every single month. Optum was charging that group $30,000 over what actually we could get the drug for the entire year. So that was just one drug. They were also on another drug that was charging the plan $25,000 a month. We went to patient assistance, right? So remember now, when you go to patient assistance, sometimes it takes about 4 to 6 weeks for them to respond, right? Because they want to play this kind of, chicken game with you, right? Is it really off the plan? Are you going to fill it? But what's interesting is a lot of these programs do what they call bridge fills. So while you're going through patient assistance, they'll give the patient the drug for free until they make a determination. So one, that they didn't pay anything in January and February, we ended up getting the drug for free. So on 2 drugs, and we're doing other stuff for them too, but just on 2 drugs, we saved the plan $550,000 by just getting 1 drug for free, moving one chemo to another chemo specialty pharmacy. At the end of the day, right now, what they're on track to spend less than $1 million this year in their pharmacy spend.
So a $700,000 on a $1.7 million. So we're talking north of 50% savings. I mean, again, I'm not going to math that. We're talking 60, 70% savings in that.
That's it on a couple hundred employees, right? It was like, about 400 employees on that doing that spend. And the president of the pharmaceutical company, the packaging company, we had a call with him. He goes, man, this is fantastic. He's doing a testimonial for us. He goes, this is great. Is there anything else we can do, kind of thing? So that's real dollars for a real mid-sized company that you think about, we talked about that. What can be added to the bottom line from a sales perspective by adding in another $700,000 that they didn't sell one more product, they didn't repackage one more piece of anything. That's real growth for them. And as a real win.
To add more money in their 401k, to open a new office in Albuquerque, to buy a new, whatever it
is, right?
So, man.
And so you think about compounding that year over year. The only thing that you can guarantee by working with one of the big guys is your claims costs are going to go up. That's the one guarantee that you have. So the guarantees on the piece of paper mean nothing. At the end of the day, they're going up.
Man. So you and I could talk about this forever. If somebody heard this, if I'm being honest, I kind of hope that they're pissed off, right? I kind of hope that. I like.
That's my goal.
Yeah, I like people's feathers to be ruffled. Like they hear this and they go, if they wanted to learn more about Drexi, get a hold of you, like figure this out. Where can somebody learn more and find you and do whatever?
Of course, you can come to our website, Drexi.com. I mean, of course, you can reach out to Lester, get in direct contact with me. We're getting ready to launch a new website in July, so everything's kind of outdated a little bit. But, we don't really sell PBM on a website, right? It's a conversation like this. So, but yeah, no, I mean, we have a lot of great tools and resources. We didn't get to everything. We have a new state-of-the-art app that helps these people with this journey. And it's great. And again, right, we're bringing consumerism back and putting it in people's hands, right? There's a better way to do this, right? You don't have to do things the same way over and over again. You can literally walk across the street and save $50 on a prescription. The reason it's not that people won't do it. They've never been given the tools to be able to do it. And that's what we're doing in the PBM space, right? We're kind of walking them through their journey and saying, hey, there's other things that you can do. And that's real dollars, Lester. I mean, you think about inflation, everything that's going on, and most people are blue-collar workers. If I can give them an extra $50, $60 for groceries or save them $1,000 on a prescription, I mean, that's real dollars for them, and it makes an impact.
I mean, I'll leave it with 2 statements. One, I would imagine you and I make more income than the average. And if somebody saved me $1,000, $1,000 is $1,000. I maybe one day I won't care about $1,000, but I think about I literally drive to the gym in the morning and I'm like, oh, I got to remember that one. That one was cheaper than that one for a couple pennies. And we just don't to your point about the tools, we've never given it to somebody. And then what I'll leave everybody with is the definition of insanity, right? You said the same thing. If you continue to do the same thing, you're working with the same advisor, you're working with the same PBMs, you're working with the same carriers, you will get the same results. Period. The end. And Albert Einstein taught us that is the definition of insanity. Anthony, thank you for shedding some light. I think now people can understand that this isn't going away. The CAA is going to be here to stay. The Johnson & Johnson was the tip of the iceberg. And when we think about what happened in the 401k industry, cleaning up the 401k industry. We're just about to see what happens. So, if there's an employer, there's an advisor out there, this was a perfect episode for you to kind of understand that this is going to happen and we need to make moves. So thank you for shedding the light. Thank you for leading the charge, and we appreciate having you on.
Thanks, Lester. Appreciate it, bud.
Awesome. For our fans out there, look, I say it every time. The only way we're going to make a movement on actually impacting healthcare is for more people to get this education. So we don't advertise. We don't ask for sponsors. We don't do anything. I just ask everybody, if this enlightened you in any way, shape, or form, share it and tell somebody else, because I think we could impact lives one employer at a time. So, Anthony, thanks a lot. And crowd, thank you so much. And we'll see you next time on Impact Healthcare.
You've been listening to Impact Healthcare, people and strategies that are disrupting the health benefits industry with Lester Morales. Remember, the journey to getting 20% savings on your healthcare benefits starts with total transparency. Remember to subscribe to the Impact Healthcare podcast on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts.